Hey, what's up, guys? It's Bakes here, and thank you for joining me for this episode of my random horror reviews. Today's movie is a horror comedy from 2020. It's one that I've actually seen before, and to be completely honest, the first time I checked it out, I actually wasn't a big fan of it at all. But I decided to give it another chance and just see if my opinions had changed or anything. So today's movie is titled Scare Me. So getting into the plot for Scare Me, these are our two main characters here on the front, starting with Fred, who is a struggling horror writer, if you can even call him that. He's sort of one of those people that claims he's got his toes dipped in a bit of everything, but he's actually none of it. But he's claiming to be a writer. He's taken a trip up into the mountains. He's rented out a cabin to sort of isolate himself and focus on writing this novel that he's starting. While he's up there, he runs into Fanny, this girl here on the front, who actually is a successful horror writer. She's got this very popular genre book that everyone seems to know. So they meet each other up there. One night there's a blizzard, all the power goes out, so they move into Fred's cabin and they just start chatting to pass the time, and they decide that they're going to try and scare each other and take turns telling scary stories, and the whole thing is them trying to one-up each other. It sort of sounds like it would be a anthology film, but it's actually not at all. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it, them trying to one-up each other with stories. Comedian Chris Redd comes in for about 20 minutes, he joins in as well. But that's pretty much the gist of it and all you really need to know. So let's get into my thoughts of Scare Me. So starting off with the characters, because this is a movie with a cast of like pretty much 4 actors really. You got these two, as I said, Chris Redd comes in for a little bit, and then you got the Uber driver, and that's really iffy if you want to count her because she's in the movie for maybe a total of 4 to 5 minutes. But I guess I'll start with our two leads. Fred is decent. It's not like he's unlikable or anything like that, but he's just kind of meh. Like, there's nothing that really draws you in about his character. But while I'm on that note, the guy that plays Fred, Josh Rubin, is also the director and writer of this movie, which you can tell from watching, his performance as Fred. He clearly has a vision of what he wants this movie to be, and you can tell that through his performance, but again, the execution is just kind of meh on it. But getting into the chick, played by Aya Cash, I'm not too familiar with her, but she plays the character of Fanny. Her first introduction into this movie, she's so fucking annoying. At least for me, I found her really annoying. Just like blatantly rude, and it's sort of passed off as like, he's weird and she's just quirky, and she's very quick-witted and everything. But I just found her to be really annoying, and as I said, just from what I could put her down as, is rude. Like, I just found her to be a annoying character. But as the movie goes on, she does get toned down a little bit, and by the third story that they're telling together, from that point on, she's a lot more bearable, so her annoying side doesn't really stick around for very long. As I said, Chris Redd, the comedian, is probably most well known for being on SNL. He's in this for a short while, but he doesn't really leave an impact either or shake up the dynamic much to really redeem the characters in this movie to a point where they're overly likable or anything like that. So getting into the actual meat and potatoes of this movie being the stories, or rather the storytelling, because like I said before, the way you describe this plot, or at least when I first heard about this movie, it sounds like it would be an anthology when it actually isn't. The way that I sort of pictured it going down was like, if you've seen The Simpsons and their Treehouse of Horror episodes, and if you don't know the blueprint of how those episodes normally go down, it's like a few characters talking amongst each other and they're like trying to one-up each other with scary stories, and then you get transported into the segment that is going on or whatever. I thought it would have been something like that, but as I said, it's very simple. It's actually just telling each other stories, and that's it. It's like sitting and watching your friends tell campfire stories, but the difference being they aren't your friends, and you don't really like them either. Like, that's pretty much what you're watching in this movie. Well, no, to be fair, the stories that they're telling actually are okay. They're actually not too bad, but they lack so much because they're just being told through words and slight theatrics. The two leads that are doing the stories, you can tell that they're doing their best to give a little bit more pizzazz and, you know, make the stories a little bit more exciting rather than having two people just talk to each other. But as you can probably imagine from the way I'm describing it, at points it gets hard to get immersed into these stories when, you know, for example, Fred's telling a story about a werewolf and it's him just in his normal clothes walking around the living room pretending to be a werewolf. It's hard to get immersed into it and like enjoy the story when the story, as I said, actually seems kind of decent. It's more so the execution. Now there are also moments where they do add in a little effects like some small props or lighting or sounds to sort of give the stories a little bit more, but it's not nearly enough. Obviously easier said than done because I don't know what budget they had to work with, but I feel like they could have like sort of inserted the cast into like these little segments. Like, as I said, if you don't have the budget or facilities to like make other sets or, you know, to fully immerse like other actors into different segments or whatever, just have these two dress up in costumes and, you know, add more effects around the cabin that all these parts are taking place in, and like sort of make it a bit more theatrical instead of, as I said, two people in their normal clothes just sort of acting out their stories. It's really hard to get into. So moving on, we've gone through our characters and the performances and the execution of the stories in this movie. And like I said before, I will say the stories or the tales or whatever you want to call them, I don't know, they're actually okay. Like, they sound like fun stories. It's just the execution ain't it. But the only story that actually kind of had me hooked was the last one, and now that I think about it, it's kind of not even a story, it's just more so the climax of this movie. If you've seen the film before, you're going to know what I'm talking about. She was actually pretty intense and engaging and easily had the best piece of performances by our two leads, which is weird to think about because that final climax and the segment that I'm talking about here where these two give their best performance, it's actually played pretty straight, where the rest of the movie beforehand was more comedic. So maybe there's a little bit of something in that, I don't know. But I guess staying on that topic, actually, I mean, for a movie that's meant to be a horror comedy, I didn't really find this movie funny, like at all. Maybe there were a couple of like dry chuckles, but for a horror comedy, it wasn't really funny. The lead was probably our funniest character, being Fred, pretty much just because of the awkward shit and scenarios that he was put into. The chick was meant to be funny, but like I said, for the first half of the movie, she was just genuinely annoying, and I found her to be rude. Even Chris Redd, for being a comedian and pretty successful on SNL, I feel like he didn't really do much to help that case either. I really don't have much else to say about this movie. To wrap it up and give it a score out of 10, I'm going to give Scare Me a 3.5 out of 10. Like I said, the first time I saw this movie, I'd say a couple of years back, maybe a year back, I don't know, something around that time, I wasn't a huge fan of it, and upon rewatch, it hasn't really changed. Maybe slightly higher score, maybe the first time around like a 3, now a 3.5, so it hasn't changed too much, but I don't know, I feel like it would have translated better with a bit more immersion, you know, actually put segments in there, you know, make it a true anthology, even if it's not, as I said, you don't have the budget to hire more cast or hire different sets or, you know, have different locations. Like, just put these guys in costumes, you know, do a little fade sequence or whatever. That was me doing a fucking special effects fade or whatever, but put them in costumes and, you know, add props around the room and everything and make them a bit more theatrical, acting out the stories. Like I said, our two cast do their best to try and give the stories a bit more life and everything, but the execution for me, as I said, just isn't there. But if you've seen this movie and have a different opinion, feel free to let me know in the comments below. But either way, that's probably going to be it for this review. Thank you for joining me, guys, and I'll see you for another video soon. Peace.